Hey everybody, my name is Chris. I am the host of PodSass, where we put the sass in sassy. And today we have Kathleen from Ecomedes, where we're going to talk about a surf trip that changed her entire perspective on the environment.
PodSass, where we're putting the sass back in sassy. Sponsored by LeadrPro, where you can book demos with target customers on demand and fill your sales pipeline instantly.
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of PodSass. Today we have Kathleen Egan from Ecomedes. How are you doing, Kathleen?
I'm great. How about you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for doing this and joining us today.
Happy to do it. I love talking about SaaS.
Before we jump into that, and jumping into kind of, we like to kick things off with a series of like rapid fire questions. But before we do that, I want to give you the opportunity to really understand what it is that you guys do. So if you want to give me just like the high level elevator pitch of Ecomedes, and then also the target customer, the target audience of who you guys are selling into, that'd be great.
Ecomedes is a B2B vertical SaaS platform. We're working in the construction building product space. And we are solving problems on both the buyer and seller side of the market, bringing them together. The two trends that inspired us to start the company were digitization of this space is behind some other markets. But even more important than that is sustainability. And the footprint and the impact of buildings is being better and better understood. And people are trying to make change, but it's really hard to change an industry like that. So that's why we exist.
When you're saying two sides of the market, who are those people, or what kind of companies are you talking about here?
Yeah, so the sellers in this market are mostly manufacturer brands, and we have customers like Herman Miller, who makes office furniture, and Interface Floor, who makes flooring, about 150 different subcategories. So if you look around you, you'll see everything in the building, drywall, plumbing, all of it. So they're the sellers. The buyers are a little more of a complex being. It's actually a committee that makes up the decision-making unit. So you have an owner who owns the building, and then you have a project team that's typically composed of an interior designer, an architect, some engineers, general contractors, and then a whole team of installers, laborers, boots on the ground who are actually building the building. So that whole group works together to make a decision about the building products.
And these are for commercial buildings, to be clear, correct?
Yeah, and what we consider commercial is any building except for single family home residences. We consider multifamily part of commercial. So pretty much every building except for a single home.
Super interesting, especially about the sustainability part of it. So we'll dive into that in a second here, but I do want to just to get to know you a little bit better around who you are as a person. We're going to just jump into a series of 10 random rapid fire questions. So I'm ready if you are.
Go for it.
Who's your favorite entrepreneur, if you have one?
Yvon Chouinard.
Okay. And why?
I feel like he really broke the ice on sustainability and environmental conservation being a driver of business, not being a charity cause. And Patagonia has really grown on sustainability as a business strategy.
Would you say that's also your favorite startup story?
No, I think I'm more of like a train wreck I like the train wrecks when it comes to startup stories. So Katerra is like a fantastic train wreck in our industry. That's one of my favorite stories. And it's sort of, the cautionary tale was a bunch of tech guys who really were brilliant at technology, but maybe didn't bring in enough of the world they were trying to replace to educate themselves about it. So that's a good one. And I'm kind of glued to my seat on the Theranos trial. I think that's a really, really interesting failure story too. So I like to learn from the failures.
That's awesome. That's a good way to look at it. Do you have a favorite charity?
Yeah, I'm actually the chairman of the board for my favorite charity right now. It's called Five Gyres, and super happy to give them a plug. It is a group that got together and went out to the ocean and saw the gyre, which is a swirling place of plastic, and found out that it's not just one gyre that was at once thought to be like this little piece of Texas that we could just pick up. It's actually 5 gyres, and it's really amorphous and hard to measure. So they've been working for over a decade to measure the plastic and take a scientific approach. Now working on reducing it, which involves upstream design changes from CPG manufacturers, all kinds of industries that use plastic. So they're they're out to change the way that plastic is harming us and our environment.
What's one piece of advice that you've been given that you truly value?
My dad told me be an engine, not a caboose.
That's a good one.
He had a lot of short good ones, but that's the one that I think about every day. Is you gonna follow or start your own train.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That being said, what's one piece of advice you would give your 18-year-old self?
Oh, just go for it. I didn't become I started on startups after business school, but I didn't become a founder and CEO until I had been a part of 7 software executive teams, and probably was ready before that. So I think go for it.
So starting a startup is hard, right? We all kind of know this. So what keeps you motivated in like that 25th hour when your back's against the wall and you have like this, I mean, I'm sure you've gone through, tons of hurdles and obstacles, but yeah, what keeps you motivated to keep things going?
Yeah, I feel like we could be the Yvon Chouinard for a whole nother massive group of companies. The new generation is much more attuned to the impact of everything and how they want to spend their time. And so to be able to not have to work for the government or a nonprofit, if you want to be part of climate solutions and sustainability solutions, you could do it from a capitalist place. And I feel like our success will really open that door for a lot of folks.
Any books or movies that you find inspiration in? Any kind of like content like that in the arts?
Yeah. I have a almost 7-year-old son, and we're getting fired up for the Winter Olympics here. My husband's actually in China working on the Olympic ski course. Yeah. So we've been watching inspiring Olympic movies. We watched Cool Runnings, which is a Jamaican bobsled, Eddie the Eagle, which is about the British ski jumper. And then we just finished Miracle on Ice.
That's very awesome. Yeah, Miracle's one of my favorite movies with Kurt Russell in it. That's awesome.
Amazing inspiration. So I love all of them.
Now, as an adult, you have more resources, right? Is there any like purchases that you made as an adult that would make your 10-year-old version proud?
I think the best was a service, and it was to go heli skiing. And I've skied since I was a little kid. And I always thought, like, am I good enough, and can I handle Alaska? And I went up there, and it's good to be humble about it. But I think my 10-year-old self would have been like, couldn't even believe that was me.
That's awesome. Which leads me to my final last question. But what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind?
Really just the impact. Like if we could shift this market a little bit and be part of the catalyst. I worked on a film called Ain't Pretty about equal pay and big wave surfing. And our film came out at a time when that was really weighing on a lot of folks. And the US soccer team was battling for it. And, I felt like this little thing actually steered the conversation. A film that I worked on. And if I could do that with the startup activity and shift both the building industry as well as the startup world, I will be very happy.
That's all we have for the rapid fire questions, but now we're going to dive into a little bit more about your personal journey to starting Ecomedes, but I think also more importantly, just like where your passion for sustainability comes from. Has that always been something that's been ingrained in you since like day one?
I've always been an outdoor person and kind of a, adrenaline person. Did a lot of skiing and biking and stuff like that. And I became pretty aware of conservation. Let's say my dad was a hunter. I knew about conservation for a long time, but it wasn't really kind of in the around 2006. Two things happened back to back that just kind of shifted me real quick. One was I was on a great surf trip in Indonesia in the middle of the jungle off Java, like no communities around, right? Very, very, very jungle. And in the tide line were all these little bits of plastic, right? And it was coming from the ocean. So we'd put so much in the ocean that was already putting it back on the beach. And this was before the gyre hadn't been discovered, right? No one knew the magnitude of the plastic problem yet. So I started picking it up. And beach to beach, surf spot to surf spot, picked it up and started making art pieces out of it. And it was really alarming to people that this much plastic was on the beach. I'm like, Jesus, there's like 1,000 times this much, People used to ask in the beginning, like, what if you run out of plastic and you can't make your artwork anymore? And it's like, that's not feasible. Then the second thing was an oil spill that happened here in San Francisco Bay. The Casco Busan, a tanker ship, smashed into the Bay Bridge, and we had 50,000 gallons of bunker fuel on the beach at my house. And it was like, wait a minute, it's the same thing as plastic, right? It's petroleum. And it was so hard, to clean it up. So those two things got me very interested, and mostly did sustainability as a after school activity, nonprofit work and charitable donations and the like, until Trump got into office. And I thought, okay, it's time for the big guns. Like, this has got to be full front and center career wise.
Was there like an aha moment for you, like when you're like, I need to make this my career?
I tried to do it back in 2005 and 2006, and it wasn't. I don't know if I should have pushed harder. The world wasn't ready, but I was working at Oracle post acquisition when the startups I was at was acquired by Oracle, and they agreed to have a sustainability and retail event, and I put together a panel of famous speakers on the topic and filled auditoriums, and thought, like, we're gonna make Oracle a sustainable company. And that was it. It was just that one marketing event. And I thought, okay, it's too early. So it clicked in my mind then, but I don't think I really gave myself permission to sort of abandon pure profit and really believe that you could have a very profitable company that is also sustainable and does the right thing for people, planet, and profits, combined. So it took a while to get the courage to pursue that.
Where did the genesis for the idea for Ecomedes then come from? Because there could be a lot of different realms that you could have tackled. So why buildings?
Yeah, and I worked in fashion for years before getting my MBA, so I tried real hard to make sustainable fashion work because it's a lot of fun, but it's kind of meaningless almost from a percentage impact standpoint, and depends which impact category you're talking. But I met my co-founder from Ecomedes. He had the idea because he was helping build buildings and was a consultant working on them and was just shuffling tremendous amounts of data. So he had built sort of a first version of it, and it was pretty consultative still in engaging with clients. And I reviewed it with him and saw that this could actually be delivered as a SaaS product and sold as a SaaS product. And so, he invited me to become a co-founder and be CEO. And so we took that, great idea that was working as a consultant's tool sort of, and started the progress for it becoming a SaaS product.
And how long ago was that when you first started the company?
He started in 2016 and was in kind of consulting mode for 2 years. And then we incorporated and raised a pre-seed round, which was really the beginning financially of the company in 2019. And
where are you guys today? Like, how many employees do you guys have now?
We're 10 employees. We've raised, we had an angel round, a friends and family round, a pre-seed round, and a seed round. And we're over $1 million in revenue. 10 employees, 5 in the Bay Area, 5 are all over the country.
Very cool. So you're in that growth stage right now.
Yeah. And it's always like, when do you get product market fit, right? And be able to pour gasoline on the fire. And when you have like the two-sided marketplace, it gives it additional nuance because the needs come together, but there are also needs outside of that connection. So they're different.
What's been one of the biggest challenges in kind of like getting this off the ground?
There are a lot of challenges for sure. I mean, greenwashing is a huge challenge, right? For many companies, sustainability still lives in the marketing department. Or the PR department or the CSR department, right? Not always like it does at a place like Herman Miller, where it lives in the product design department, it lives in the sales department, right? It lives in all the operational teams. So that is a bit of that maturity curve. A challenge we have on the buyer side is that the teams who have started to mobilize to address sustainability, they tend to organize by impact category. So you've got energy, water, carbon, toxicity, circularity, and social, right? Roughly, those are, you could fraction those out more, but that's roughly the 6 impacts. It's everything. Buildings, kind of touch everything. So if a team is working on carbon, they'll say, oh, well, I don't know, it's more important for me to get renewable energy, not to look at the consumption of the building. If somebody's working on toxicity, they might say, well, the dyes in our product are really toxic. So what if the drywall and the flooring's toxic? We only do, 10 renovations a year, right? So the fact that the folks who are in charge of these things, very few people, except for maybe the CEO, look across all those impact categories, whereas that's what we provide, is a comprehensive view of it. And we think it's the most important view to have. So it's a maturation of the org charts, right? To not have like someone on a circularity team over here and a carbon team over here, because to either of them, we're a partial solution. But if somebody is looking across all the impacts, then we're a very complete solution. So that is probably the biggest challenge we see on the building owner developer side. But yet folks are issuing science-based targets, right? Net zero declarations, like all those things that are being put out into PR, the investors are going to come back and check on them. And it's going to be a lot of hard work to get it done. And they can't, I don't think very many companies can do it. If they own buildings, the buildings have to be part of that plan. Even if it's not the first thing they work on, they gotta come back and make their building sustainable.
And so how do you lead like that conversation when, you're out there trying, like from the discovery process, for example, of like working with a brand new potential buyer? What does that conversation look like? Do you tend to like ask some certain like qualifying questions about, how they're prioritizing sustainability, trying to really understand their organization, how they're making these types of decisions first? Because I can see like how it can get very complicated of like a decision-making process from a buyer perspective. So how do you approach it? Like, are there certain questions that you like to ask or get answers to up front?
Yeah, a lot of it, we could do our own research ahead of time, right? So have they done any kind of carbon-based accounting? Have they, you could read their CSR report and find out, like, is this 100% greenwashing, or have they actually like started the journey? And if they're on the journey, someone in their company probably has a handle on how complex it is. And I think that is part of why buildings have been, think about the news. When you hear of sustainability, you hear about EVs, right? Transportation and renewables, solar, wind, hydro, right? Whatever. You don't hear as much about buildings, not because they're not a big contributor, but it's very, very hard to change it. So that has put it sort of down on the list. And then the piece that is probably more complex than people even know are all the different types of impact that each product can have, and the tracking of that information. It's quite thick, right? And the PIM system, product information management systems for building product manufacturers, don't handle it. So it's all managed in Excel, PDFs, right? It's outside of the system, done over email, physical catalogs kind of thing. So those complexities are still to be learned by a lot of folks on the buyer side, and we can research them and get an idea of where they are. The way we have kind of started the conversation with them is, number one, really learning. We have decent product market fit for where we are on the seller side. On the buyer side, we're still learning for what I call the free market. The government, we understand pretty well. We've implemented one site at Sandia National Labs. It's the prototype for sites. We'll roll out sites at the government pace. Like, we have a good handle on that. On the free market, it's very different. So we always lead with wanting to learn, wanting to help. And our version one of this was, we'll replace all your consultants. And that was our ROI, because they have to hire lots of expensive consultants, category by category, floor by floor, to do the vetting of materials and products to make sure they're sustainable. And now what we've learned is, okay, we can't get rid of all the consultants right away. There's a gap between what our tool does, a gigantic database of information about products, and the process to actually go through the purchase of the product. So we're kind of bringing some advisory services back in as part of the journey.
Just kind of like going back to the start of the company with you and your founder, and before you guys raised any capital, I know he was doing this on a consulting basis, but what convinced you that you needed to be a part of this? Because and I'll ask this, and I'll pose it because it's a risk, right? It's like you go from your background, having done the executive roles, right, and having that consistent, steady stream of income and taking that paycheck, to then like going and starting something fairly new, like even though your co-founder has had a consulting business where it was generating some revenue, so some semblance of fit there, but it's still a big risk to go in there and actually try to build a business off of it. So I think my curiosity, I think a lot of like the audience's curiosities tend to stem around what convinces you to make that jump, because not a lot of people do that.
Yeah. I mean, out of 7 startups I was at, 6 out of 7 were white guys, right? That I worked for one black guy, but almost all white guys. And I just always thought there's a different way to run a company. And some of them were great companies. Many of them were not. I know you've asked some folks about like the worst job. The worst jobs are when the management doesn't really see everybody, right? Doesn't really see every person in the company. And even though I was at the executive conference room table, right, I didn't feel I was seen the same. So what gave me the power to jump and go do it was having seen companies run so poorly, and knowing I could do a better job, and being able to bring that to the climate fight and really any way, but especially attractive at scale. The size of the, not 5.6 million commercial buildings in the United States, and just like the amount of drywall, the amount of flooring, and how hard it is to change. So I liked the challenge of it. I liked that it was considered sort of a late adopter of tech, and had gone through the whole tech adoption with retail. I started in a DC for Chanel, like with paper pick tickets, right? And we automated that. It was like, oh, these don't have to be paper anymore. Like, so knowing that in my heart that technology can solve things like that, and seeing the data involved in the sustainability was like, there's no way people are going to get this unless it's made really, really simple, and only technology can do that.
How would you say that you have made things really simple for the buyers in this process? Because I feel like there's 2 components, right? There's 2 components here that you're selling essentially. It's like, one is the digital aspect of moving away from, like, say, the Excel spreadsheets, at least for a certain part of their catalogs or their what they're buying. And then the other part of it is like the sustainability component, which is like, to be able to meet whatever their initiatives are internally. So, how do you feel like you guys have made it simpler on either end?
Well, so for the manufacturer, is where we have like, actual case studies about how we've made it simple. Is people that used to manage this really manually now work on other stuff. Full head counts of people. The push of that data out into the market is no longer, a job shop for each piece of collateral and each question a customer has. They are now taking tools, and it goes in waves, right? It goes like from their own customer support team to their sales team, which is a big hop because that's a national sales team who don't have a large attention span, right? So getting them to use the tool, and then all the way out to the actual customers, and making, one of our kind of vectors of goals is universal product transparency, right? Anybody should be able to know anything about any product at any time. We're a very long way from there, but what we're doing is getting it started. So manufacturers are on that track, and they're doing it without, lots of people. The bigger picture for the manufacturer that we're working on now is turn it into a sales tool, right? Don't just help save me time on this now, help me weaponize this as a way to beat my competition. And our goal is nothing short of putting anybody out of business who doesn't have transparent products, and giving all that market share to the early adopters who started making their products transparent early in the game. On the buyer side, if you were to take, it's like a 300-page PDF, right, that the government first issued and said, here's our sustainability plan, right? So if you're a procurement officer procuring drywall, electronics, even like tea for the break rooms, anything for a building, you need to consult this manual, look up all these certifications. It's like alphabet soup, right? You don't know what any of them mean. You'll go to those websites for those certifications. They don't neatly list out which products they've certified, right? You just would end up with low compliance. So now the government procurement team in a click can find products that meet their requirements, take a given product, assess it, and take a whole group of products, and assess them. And a big pushback from that use case was, well, we have lots of products that aren't in your database. We have 850,000 products, and there's probably at least double that, right? If you include all the non-transparent products. So we've, it's a small thing, but we've built a way where they can just add the non-transparent products, right? Just to do the math on how transparent a whole order or a whole kit of products is. And now we could take that to the manufacturer and say, hey, you're going to get cut out of this order, over time, because you're sitting here you're hurting their score. And this group isn't going to get funding from the Department of Energy unless they hit a certain score. So it's really the power of that government buyer that made that simplification possible.
Got it. So for them, it's like if they don't meet these certain criteria, they're not going to get a certain level of funding.
That's
so
right.
That's what they're motivated by.
That's
Okay.
right.
Okay. And so you guys make it easy. Well, basically, like at the click of a button, as opposed to going to a 300-page manual to make that instant. Okay. Got it. That visibility is a lot more accessible then for them. Because my question, my follow-up question was going to be around, what is going to shift and make these, the buyers prioritize sustainability. Like, let's just say outside of the government, right? Like more, independent or privately owned companies, what's driving them? Like I guess I had a conversation with, for example, like a SaaS company for the waste management industry. And, he basically was telling me that, on the consumer level, it's becoming more and more important to know where their waste is going, right? They want to make sure that it's actually their recyclables are taken to being recycled, their waste is actually taken to waste, but there's no level of visibility around that right now. And that's the driving factor, because now waste management companies are going to lose business if they don't show that visibility. So do you see a certain parallel in that, in terms of these privately run companies, of where their customers or their clients are driving for more sustainability practices or a higher level of that?
Yeah, it is because their customers are driving for it exactly, and regulation. And the most powerful piece, the customer's driving for it is true, but I think slow. So, renters, tenants, it's starting to be a factor. And we have a couple of customers, one awesome customer named Casada, who's making microgreen communities. And they've targeted an audience who wants sustainability built into their homes. Right. So there's an example where the customer is driving it pretty directly. So sometimes it's a little less direct, right? If a company's looking for office space, are they just going to take the cheapest office space? Or are they going to start asking about LEED certifications and off-gassing? I'd love them to do the second, but it's slow. What's much faster is going to be the capital. So the capital market is influencing the buyer side in two ways. One, through equity disclosures, right? If they're a public company, asking for ESG disclosures, and some of that, if you're a commercial real estate company, or even somebody like Wells Fargo with lots of property on your balance sheet, right? How are you assessing the sustainability of that for ESG disclosures? Those questions are, I think, more motivating to Wells Fargo than like a bank, a retail banker coming in their office and asking about the carpeting. And even more powerful than the equity side is the debt side. Sustainable bonds have been growing like crazy. I think it was 650 billion were issued last year. And only a few years ago, these were mostly just going to like governments and, municipal kind of projects. Now they're being offered to private projects. So the cost of capital to make a sustainable building is significantly lower than the cost of capital to make a building where, leave it to chance. So those are two, financial motivators that I think will move faster than the customer demand piece. Another one is employee retention. Getting talent right now, it's a seller's market for talent. And so companies that are trying to retain and keep, especially sort of next gen and develop the next generation of their leadership, they have a very different opinion about this stuff. And if they feel their company is, doing the wrong thing, are much more apt to walk away. And I think that keeps a lot of CEOs up at night, is like, talent drain. If they don't do something, they don't know, is it enough? Who knows? But those are, I think, even bigger than the demand driving it, like with the waste example.
When you talk about regulations, like that's for you guys, then it's like that's more like reactive, right? Like you can try to identify um, different types of companies that have to follow these regulations or are motivated by that. But how are you able to be more proactive against those that let's just say are looking for like the talent retention aspect? Is there a way for you to identify those types of companies to be more proactive in terms of like going out to them and generating awareness in front of those types of audiences?
I think we've been okay at identifying some of the companies, but really the bigger challenge has been finding the right person at the company. Everybody organizes this kind of differently, and it's really difficult to find the right person and the right person with budget. This is kind of new. And the fact that tools can help accelerate it, especially SaaS tools, hasn't been, baked into the budget year after year, like say the HR software or, the cloud software, right? So sometimes it's kind of like we're interacting with a group who hasn't bought SaaS tools before. And that, kind of brings into question, well, who is the right person to do that, to help you on this journey. But I do think people get the need, like, okay, they got to invest here, right? They don't want to be left behind. There's this notion for buildings called stranded asset risk that our friends over at Measurable, which is an awesome startup working on connecting to the building's actual power and water draw, and using that for different kind of rating systems. I think they coined that term. And it's the fact that if an asset starts to fall behind, right, the market of buyers for that asset is going to start to go down. Okay. Then just kind of like with oil stocks, if there's less folks to buy it, when the endowments stop buying oil stocks and divested, that hurt, right? It's not that the fundamental underlying asset value has really changed very much, but the market of buyers has shifted. So if the market of buyers shifts for buildings to where an asset could be stranded if it falls behind, that's pretty motivating for a property owner.
All very great information. I think we are good to kind of wrap things up here, unless there's anything else that you wanted to add. But it was really empowering to kind of like hear your journey towards your passion for sustainability, and also just actually, taking action on it and making this a part of your profession and your career. And I think I learned a lot, especially around like the idea of, just the idea of buildings and how much of that has an impact on our environment and all that too. In a 5 years time, like what would you ideally like to see Ecomedes be at? And what kind of, dent would you like to have made in this space?
We'd like to see in 5 years time that every person who is looking at evaluating, products going into a building has the information they need to select something that's more transparent. The motivation and the information. And that can happen in 5 years time. It's not everyone coming to us for the information. We'll need to put the information into places like, Coupa for procurement, other government systems that we're working on. Like there's a lot of places the information would need to be. But we want to influence every single purchase decision, not with our company, but with the information. And we'll become more of like Intel Inside. We're a B2B. We're powering the buyers and the sellers to use this information to make it a competitive advantage.
Thank you again for joining us today, Kathleen. It was super insightful, and it was a great. We haven't had somebody, I think, with your level of passion for sustainability, let alone having a business that is built on that as a foundation. So it's just really exciting to kind of have this conversation and also just pick up on what it is that you're doing and sharing that story. I'm happy and proud to be helping to share that story, because I think the awareness is a big part of this. So thank you again for taking the time. I know you're super busy, and in terms of like getting the business off the ground and getting it up and running and finding market fit. So I wish you nothing but the best of luck in the future of Ecomedes. And again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you too. It was a lot of fun.
All right, perfect. Thanks so much. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode, where it was very encouraging to see entrepreneurs like Kathleen who are actually really making a very tangible difference on the environment and the health of this planet. So if you like what you saw and want to hear other future entrepreneurial stories, please go ahead and click the subscribe button below or give us 5-star reviews because we like those reviews. Thanks so much.